video I'm releasing on the Man of Lawlessness is something I made actually a couple of years ago, just for fun to send to a few of my friends. Uh, for the most part, my views are still pretty much the same on it. A few little minute details have changed here and there, but hope you guys enjoy it. Since we were doing our series on eschatology, I figured it might be handy. So hopefully you guys enjoy it as much as I enjoyed making it. Don't judge me too harshly. That was one of the first videos I made when I was figuring out how to edit, so the production quality isn't exactly perfect. I got a little carried away with green screening and things of that nature, but for the most part, still the same view. All of it comes from this book, the complete works of Josephus.
Today we're going to be going over a little something everybody's kind of probably familiar with. Who is the man of lawlessness in 2 Thessalonians 2, and who is his restrainer? Seems a lot of times we kind of conglomerate the man of lawlessness and the Antichrist into a singular figure. So today I'm going to kind of be talking about the one person who I think is actually the strongest candidate. 2 Thessalonians 2, 1 through 12 today is one of the most talked about passages of Scripture in our world. It seems like everybody's got an idea who this figure is and they want to talk about it. So I'm going to go ahead and read this passage to you guys. Now, we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, that you do not be quickly shaken from your composure or be disturbed either by a spirit or a message or a letter, as if from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord is come. Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things? And you know what restrains him now, so that in his time he will be revealed. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. Then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring an end by the appearance of his coming. That is the one whose coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, with all power and signs and false wonders, and with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. For this reason God will send upon them a deluding influence, so that they will believe what is false, in order that they all may be judged who did not believe the truth, but took pleasure in wickedness. So, looking over this passage here, there's a lot of things that stick out. Like in verse 2, that you not be quickly shaken from your composure, or be disturbed either by a spirit or a message or a letter, as if from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. Now, the day of the Lord here is talking about what Christ spoke about at the Olivet Discourse, the day of judgment upon Israel. We know that happened in 70 AD. Paul is believed to be writing this letter in the 50s, early 50s. So this is before, they're still looking forward to the day of the Lord, the worst day in the history of Second Temple Judaism. Another side note is that Jesus promised on the Mount of Olives for this judgment to occur during this generation. This generation shall not pass. So I'm going to take a closer look here at verse 3. For it will not come, it being the day of the Lord, unless the apostasy comes first and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction. So obviously Christ is talking about the second temple being destroyed at 70 AD. We're in the 50s here. So sometime in the 50s or the 60s, this man of lawlessness is going to have to reveal himself, with us knowing the day of the Lord came at 70 AD. So we have a small window of time here between Paul writing this and the day of the Lord for this man to appear. So another event that we have to have happen between this period and 70 AD is this apostasia. It's a Greek word, Strong's 646, defection from truth, apostasy, a rebellion. So this is something, this revolt that did happen. It's known to Jews today as the Great Revolt. It is actually what sparked all the events of the Roman-Jewish War, the 7-Year War. A lot of this information I'm getting has come from Josephus. I suggest you pick one up, read it yourself. I believe the culmination of this war, 70 AD, the siege of Jerusalem, that is the day of the Lord that has been talked about since the Old Testament and prophesied by Christ on the Mount of Olives. The war actually ended in 73. The final city to fall was the mountaintop city of Masada, something else you can read about in Josephus's works. Obviously, this man of lawlessness, or man of sin, as some translations call him, would be intimately connected with this rebellion, this war. Um, so I would say probably we could start looking for him in the 60s, early 60s, and start seeing some evidence for him. So Paul gives us a few more details about this man. He opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. This is where I believe a lot of people get messed up with this. They end up typically spiritualizing this in some way, trying to make this about the church, or they'll make this about a future third temple that I can't see any reference to apart from Ezekiel's temple, which I would believe is a Christian church. It's just too massive. If you look at the scaling of it, it would fit over the top of Judea. That's something that's not plausible to be built. I believe that's obviously talking about the ecclesia or the Christian church in Ezekiel. So other than that, take that out the equation. I do not see a future temple anywhere else in Scripture. So I think we're reaching when we try to make the Olivet Discourse future. So I'm going to keep on going ahead. Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things? And you know what restrains him now, so that in his time he will be revealed. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. So this is another interesting passage. And you know what restrains him now, so that in this time he will be revealed. In this time, Paul's talking present tense. They know who he is, and they know what's restraining him. I don't see Paul talking about something in the future to the Thessalonians here. And then Paul goes on to say, the mystery of lawlessness is already at work, present. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. Present again. I don't see any future in this text. So something else worth mentioning here, Paul being a Pharisee of Pharisees, he would say the law is the Mosaic law. So any lawlessness would be something that goes against or contrary to the Mosaic law. So I'm going to move on to verse 8. Then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming. So what I'm getting here is then that lawless one, singular figure. I don't think it's an entity or anything like that. I think it's a physical man. Will be revealed, and the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming, talking about the day of the Lord, which has been prophesied since the Old Testament, which we can verify. The Jews would have believed that this was an army coming to destroy them. We even see this in the Luke account of the Olivet Discourse, when it says, when you see the desolation of armies surrounding the city. Okay, so moving on. That is the one whose coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, with all power and signs and false wonders, and with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. For this reason, God will send upon them a deluding influence, so that they will believe what is false, in order that they all may be judged who did not believe the truth, but took pleasure in wickedness. So who can we look at here at this time period who refused to love the truth and so be saved, who rejected our Messiah? Look no further than the Jews and Jerusalem in particular. Christ at the Olivet Discourse gave the warning, when you see all these things, flee to the hills of Judea to be saved. And these people didn't obey it. So I'm going to propose an individual that I read about again in Josephus's works. John of Gischala, also known as Yohanan ben Levi, John son of Levi. I believe he checks all the boxes for the Man of Lawlessness, and I'll go over a few points with you guys now. Josephus records that this man is a treacherous person, very cunning. He's a ready liar. He's a hypocritical pretender, and he spared not the shedding of blood. He says that he had a peculiar knack at thieving and gathered a band of 400 men, vagabonds that had run away from villages, and by the means of these he laid waste all Galilee. By book 4, we see Titus, the general of Rome, engaged in a campaign trying to suppress this revolt in Judea. Major cities, or even the small cities in Galilee, have fallen, with the exception of John's hometown, Goshala. And by this time and point, John's little band of merry men, or thieves as we'd like to call them, they have taken over Goshala. And John petitions Titus to leave him alone overnight because the next day is the Sabbath, and they didn't want to fight on the Sabbath, which Titus, being a pretty decent guy, agreed to. So basically, when Titus agrees to pull back, here's what Josephus records. Thus did this man put a trick upon Titus, not so much out of regard to the seventh day as to his own preservation. He's deceived Titus. Josephus also records, now this was the work of God, who therefore preserved this John, that he might bring on the destruction of Jerusalem. So that night, John immediately heads for the hills. He didn't head for the hills. He flees to the city of Jerusalem on horses with a group of people following him. Josephus records about 9,000, and this group was made up of men, women, and children, not just men. Of course, the women and children couldn't keep up quite as well as the men, and when they started getting a little slow, John encouraged his men to leave the women and children behind, which they did, a lot of them. The next morning, Titus arrives at Goshala, and he's, pretty upset that he's been deceived. So immediately he tells his men to chase after John and his men as fast as they can. So the Romans pursue John and his men, and they realize pretty quick that they can't catch him. The ones that were left behind are slower. I think it was 6,000 is the number that Josephus records, were slaughtered by the Roman men. They made their way back to Titus at Goshala to tell him that they couldn't catch him. Meanwhile, John arrives in Jerusalem, and he's getting a hero's welcome. The people are all waiting for him, thunderous applause. And then he starts spinning his stories, telling them that the Romans are weak, they're nothing special. If they band together, they can take him. And obviously the young men, you know how young men are, they're excited at the prospect of war and proving themselves, and they all start getting excited and basically rallying to John. Now, as much as the younger ones were eager to prove themselves and go to war, the older, wiser citizens of Judea knew that they didn't stand a chance against the Roman Empire, way above their pay grade. They wanted peace. This divisiveness between these two groups, it seemed to split whole cities apart, particularly Jerusalem and all of Judea. You've got one group that wants peace, one group that's eager to try to take on Rome for whatever reason. This is where the zealots come into the picture. So they're basically just a band of criminals, bandits, all over Judea. Anytime anybody says anything good about Rome or not wanting to fight Rome, they just basically kill them and take whatever they've got. And it seems more and more of them kept funneling into Jerusalem. This is causing a big problem. These zealots are assassinating leaders and elders of Jerusalem that want peace, that are trying to give them the wise counsel. And it seems like every time they kill one of these leaders or priest, they replace them with a zealot leader or priest, slowly stacking the deck in their favor. So it's at this time and point that Josephus introduces who I believe to be the restrainer of John Levi, which would be the high priest Annas. I'm going to read you what Josephus records about him. Now the citizens of Jerusalem were going to rise against John's men, for Annas, the oldest of the high priests, persuaded them to it. He was a very prudent man, and had perhaps saved the city if he could but have escaped the hands of those that plotted against him. Those men made the temple of God a stronghold for them, and a place whither they might resort in order to avoid the troubles they feared from the people. The sanctuary was now become a refuge and a shop of tyranny. They undertook to dispose of the high priesthood by casting lots for it, whereas, as we have said already, it was to descend by succession in a family. The pretense they made for this strange attempt was an ancient practice, while they said that of old it was determined by lot. But in truth, it was no better than a dissolution of an undeniable law, and a cunning contrivance to seize upon the government derived from those that presumed to appoint governors as they themselves pleased. So, by replacing these priests and elders with men from their own ranks, the zealots, other zealots, eventually they ended up taking over the temple. And at this time and point, uh, the people, the elders mostly, they couldn't take it anymore. So they decided to rise up and try to stand against it. So Annas and another high priest, actually named Jesus, rebuked the citizens of Jerusalem for being so passive and allowing the zealots to murder the other priests and elders and slowly take over the city. So Josephus uses some descriptive words about Annas the high priest. Seems to display him in a very favorable manner. He calls him a prodigious lover of liberty, an admirer of democracy, preferring public welfare and peace above all things. So Annas was a pretty wise man. He knew that uh, the Jews did not have a snowball's chance in hell in standing against the might of the Roman Empire. So his main objective here is to de-escalate this rebellion, try to bring the people back in check, and make peace with Rome. Smart man. So Annas riles the people up. Hey, if we want there to be a Judea, we have to basically stand against this tyranny right now. And he marched on the temple, where the zealots have set themselves up. This is when civil war broke out in Judea. And we've got the more experienced, probably younger zealots, better equipped, basically fighting against, seems like to me, older population, people that weren't soldiers, weren't equipped for it, and mass civil war. Believe it or not, probably due to sheer number, Annas and his men, the people, I guess it could be men, women, children, they actually pushed the zealots back just because they had overwhelming numbers into the inner court of the sanctum of the temple. But Annas immediately stops them from pursuing because he does not want to defile the temple. He does not want to fight and shed blood inside the temple. Of course, it gets defiled anyways because the zealots would go outside, fight a little bit, get wounded, and come back inside the temple, bleeding on the floor, which defiled the temple. So during this time period, our candidate for the Man of Lawlessness, John, son of Levi, has not yet fully sided with the zealots. He's doing what he does best. He's being deceitful. He has actually positioned himself to be Annas's chief counsel, won over a lot of the people. But in the middle of the night, he's going up to the zealots and telling them their plans and giving them information. So he gains so much trust from Annas that Annas actually sends him to negotiate with the zealots. He gets up there and he tells a few fibs. He lies about how prepared the city is, what their preparations are against him, and tells them he is sent by God to lead them. So John's next hat trick he pulls, he tells the zealots that he has called in the Idumeans, who are from another city real close, to come and help. And by this time of point, the zealots are terrified of this man, and they actually make him their leader. Meanwhile, 20,000 Idumeans march on the gate of Jerusalem. Annas sees him coming and immediately says it needs to be shut because he doesn't know what these men are going to be doing. He's starting to see what's going on with John, not trust him, smarten up a little bit. And it's a good thing he did, I would say, because the Idumeans were coming to side with the zealots. And seeing it may have not been a good thing that he shut the gate, because when they saw the gate shut, they believed that they were truly coming there to fight a righteous civil war. They were on the side of liberty. So, fueled by zealot lies and the gate, upset with the gate being shut, the Idumeans have already made their decision. They're going to side with the zealots. That night, a horrible thunderstorm happens, and it was just enough cover for the zealots to walk out and open the gates of Jerusalem and let their Idumean allies in. So as the Idumeans get into the city, them, along with the zealots, just start plundering and killing everybody in their path. Really seeking out the two high priests, Annas and Jesus, trying to take them captive. So next, the zealots finally get a hold of Annas and Jesus, and here's what they obviously executed him. Here's what Josephus has to say about the death of Annas, the one who I believe is the restrainer of the Man of Lawlessness. He says, "I should not mistake if I said that the death of Annas was the beginning of the destruction of the city. And from this very day may be dated the overthrow of her wall and the ruin of her affairs. Whereon they saw their high priest and the procurer of their preservation slain in the midst of their city." So, eventually, after all this happens, the Idumeans kind of see the error of their ways. They repent. They start feeling bad about killing their own countrymen. Here's what Josephus records. He says, "Seeing they had once been partners with them in shedding the blood of their own countrymen, it was high time to put a stop to such crimes and not continue to afford any more assistance to such as are subverting the laws of their forefathers." With the removal of the high priest and the Idumeans leaving the city, the zealots, with John now fully established in charge as the leader, have full reign over Jerusalem. Here's what Josephus records. "These men therefore trampled upon all the laws of men and laughed at the laws of God, and for the oracles of the prophets they ridiculed them as the tricks of jugglers." At this point, the zealots went even further into debauchery. They're basically plundering for sport, murdering the men, torturing the women, cross-dressing, and actually fornicating with one another. Josephus records, "And thus did they roll themselves up and down the city as in a brothel house, and defiled it entirely with their impure actions. Nay, while their faces looked like the faces of women, they killed with their right hands, and when their gait was effeminate, they presently attacked men and became warriors, and drew their swords from under their finely dyed cloaks, and ran everybody through whom they alighted upon." So fast forward just a little bit to 69. We've got two new rival parties arising in Jerusalem. The first of these was Eleazar, who defected from John's own men with 2,400 of John's zealots, and he was just as wicked as John. There's another player in this. His name is Simon, and he was invited in by the citizens to try to help deal with John, and this is just before the arrival of Rome. So between these three groups, we have lots of death, lots of destruction, civil war. Um, During this time period, we actually see John Levi destroy the city's food stores, which would have, they say, held him for up to 12 years, uh, because he claimed that he could make food pop up out of thin air. Now, around this time, John basically establishes himself as a monarch, and they've already desecrated the temple with blood and things of that nature, and the temple has basically became his palace. That's where he's seated. Um, he views himself as a messianic figure, and a lot of the people that follow him do. So he then further goes to desecrate the temple. A lot of the objects and things like that, he has them melted down, basically putting himself on the level of God, reasoning that he can speak for God. He can say that this is okay. We need to melt these objects down. So after basically positioning himself um, as God's monarch over the people of Israel, Josephus records, "But as for John, when he could no longer plunder the people, he betook himself to sacrilege and melted down many of the sacred utensils which had been given to the temple, as also many of those vessels which were necessary for such as ministered about holy things, the cauldrons, the dishes, and the tables, and said to those that were with him that it was proper for them to use divine things while they were fighting for the divinity without fear, and that such those whose warfare is for the temple should live of the temple. On which account he emptied the vessels of that sacred wine and oil, which the priests kept to be poured on the burnt offerings, and which lay in the inner court of the temple, and distributed it among the multitude. I suppose that had the Romans made any longer delay in coming against these villains, that the city would either have been swallowed up by the ground, opened up upon them, or been overflowed by water, or else been destroyed by such thunder as the country of Sodom perished by, for it had been brought forth a generation of men much more atheistical than were those that suffered such punishments. For by their madness it was that all the people came to be destroyed." So eventually, after all this stuff continues and keeps getting worse and worse and worse, Rome surrounds the city. They camped on the Mount of Olives. Josephus records that the east gate was shut, and in the middle of the night it opened, and it took 20 men to open it. Nobody knows how it opened, and the Romans made their way in through the city. But when they got in, due to all the civil war, famine, and there was also a plague going on at this time, um, most of the city was actually dead. So Titus makes his way to the temple where John Levi has basically barricaded himself in. And he's done it in a smart way, very similar to the way the Spartans did with the Hot Gate. Just this one narrow entrance to the temple. So Rome's numbers really don't matter much. He lasted for weeks. They keep sending in as many as they can send in. They can't seem to take the temple. And by this time and point, all the bodies are starting to pile up. The Roman soldiers, Josephus records, actually nailed nails through their boots so that they wouldn't slip on the floor because the bodies were up to their waist. Eventually, Titus and Josephus go and try to negotiate with John Levi, and John Levi won't accept. It's kind of a little ambiguous here as to who actually burned the temple down, if it was the Roman soldiers or John Levi himself. But the temple burns to the ground nonetheless, causing the daily sacrifice to end, which could have been the high priest being murdered. One way or the other, the daily sacrifice, the 70th week of Daniel, has been fulfilled here, as well as Jesus' prophecy in the Olivet Discourse. And the reason for that is the roof was made of gold. So when the fire started burning, the gold literally melted down into the bricks. So Titus ordered the Roman soldiers to destroy the bricks to get the gold out of them. So not one stone left upon another. utterly destroyed, much worse than what Antiochus did, and actually much worse than what the Babylonians did, because I do believe that when Jeremiah and them came back to the city, they could tell where the temple was. They actually used some of the blocks from the original temple to rebuild the second temple. So John Levi is eventually captured and taken back to Rome and lives a tortured rest of his life, however long that is. I think he checks every one of the boxes for the Man of Lawlessness. So once again, everything I shared with you guys in this came from Josephus's The Complete Works, specifically the books on the Roman-Jewish war in here. Check it out yourself. Don't take what I've told you and just accept it as gospel. Go check it out yourself. I think it perfectly parallels with the fact that we see Paul seems to be indicating that this man is already at work. Something's holding him back in the present tense. And he identified him in the holding, whatever was holding him back or whoever was holding him back, to the Thessalonians. Thanks.